AEW Dynamite was affected by winter weather. So one of the matches that was suggested, which was Samoa Joe versus Nick Wayne, was canceled. Didn't seem to matter that much. I don't think that would have saved this show. This show was not good. Look, I've been saying for a long time that the show is not good. But the end of the show, let's skip to the end, was Jon Moxley and his group once again beating up the baby faces. Look, I understand the conception of getting heat. That's what wrestling is all about. Wrestling is about the heat. The problem is it can't be all heat all the time. Then eventually the fans lose interest because the baby faces look completely and totally ineffectual and that they can't do their job. I mean, if you watch the cartoon and Skeletor always won, that would be a problem. If the Cobra Commander is just kicking the shit out of the G.I. Joes all the time, you would ask the question, like, why am I watching this? You know, if the Shredder is kicking the shit out of the Ninja Turtles every single time you watch the show, is it worth cheering the Ninja Turtles? No. You gotta have a balance. Nice balance. Now, usually when we talk about children's cartoons, the heroes are going to win 99 out of 100 times, which theoretically should happen. Now, they should face some serious challenges in winning. It may take longer than usual, but they will win. In this situation, nobody has gone over in this Moxley situation. I mean, they've beaten a couple of his goony goo-goos. They've beaten some guys. Yuta and Pac and all these guys. They've beaten these guys. But in terms of standing tall at the end of the show, not really. The one time they did was, I think, the end of the pay-per-view where Edge returned and chased him off, and then he yelled at Moxley, called him kid. His gray hair got all in the way and his microphone stopped working and a bunch of stuff. Interesting, but no. You got to have some stronger baby faces. Got to have some baby faces people believe in. That's one of the big problems with this show, is even if you get an over baby face, they end up getting choked out or beat up or somehow sausaged by the end of the night. You can't do that. You simply can't do it. Nobody cares about these people. You got to get somebody to care. Oh, I'm all the way into the... Look, January 22nd, 2024, we're going to talk about AEW Dynamite. I had to get that off my chest. We're going to talk about that more later. But we got some news and notes to discuss. Number one, the news came out the other day that, earlier on June 22nd, that Ricky Starks had asked for his release and AEW has refused it. None of that is a surprise. People are start calling it Guantanamo Bay. That has been on social media. Very, very funny. The Guantanamo Bay is pretty funny. That being said, it seems like he's just holding these guys to his contract. I don't see the point. I really don't see the point in holding them to their contracts. At least for the full duration of the contract, it seems pointless. Just let these people go. I've said that before. There's 3 or 4 guys that seemingly want to be out of AEW very badly. I don't see how it benefits your company to keep these guys around and holding on to them. This has led to more people like Conan, who we're going to speak about a little bit, saying that there's more to the story than even we know now in terms of the treatment of Penta and Phoenix and AEW. And I will say this before, buying into everything Conan says. He has a knack for doing that, though. Of basically just saying how all the Mexicans have been mistreated in pretty much every company they've ever worked in. He claimed that the Mexicans were mistreated and there was race problems in WCW. He claimed the Mexicans was mistreated and there were race problems in TNA. Now he's claiming that there's race issues and the Mexicans are being mistreated in AEW. It's just continuing over and over again. He's like the Al Sharpton of Lucha Libre, where he's always finding these race issues. And sometimes he will say that the boys are the problem. Like, I think he would openly admit that Juventud was a problem. But Penta and Phoenix seem to be two guys that he really likes, and he's taken up for them. And he thinks that there's going to be more exits. And we had a lengthy discussion about how things are going to blow up in Tony Khan's face. But in that discussion, he also had other conversations that were a little bit darker in nature, let's say, as we transition away from Phoenix and, you know, Ricky Starks and all those guys who are never going to get out of those contracts until Tony Khan either finds God or the dates run out. Conan was the one who made the comment that Britt Baker had cheated on Adam Cole. And this became a huge issue. It's not worth having its own video. I know some people would, but I don't really like gossip because I don't think this matters that much. But this has been something that has floated around for a year. The Wrestle Purist guy was one of the first people to mention that, and I think Conan also had mentioned it. And this was earlier last year. It's probably before the winter last year. I can't tell you exactly what day. But they had mentioned that Adam Cole and Britt Baker had broken up, and that the reason for it was Britt Baker's cheating. So, in the discussion of Britt Baker being benched in AEW recently, Conan mentioned it again, that Britt Baker had cheated, and that's the reason why her and Adam Cole are not together. Britt Baker then responded to that statement by saying, quote, "I understand we as performers are expected to have thick skin through opinions and lies we read about ourselves, but spreading lies about my personal life is just low, weird, and something I won't tolerate. I've never cheated on anyone in my life. Hashtag tell your source." There's some people who still believe it. I don't think it matters. To be quite honest, I really don't think it matters. But it says a lot that this is what people think is happening. Because you have to understand, too, Conan also understands that people don't like Britt Baker. And he has confirmed that, and other people have confirmed it as well, that Britt Baker is not very well liked in the locker room. People spread rumors about people that they don't like. And sometimes those rumors are very vicious. Sometimes those rumors are very mean. Sometimes those rumors are just rumors because they want to ruin that person's relationship. They want to ruin that person's reputation. Maybe Conan was told, maybe the Wrestle Purist guy, maybe he was told that Britt Baker had cheated on Adam Cole. That doesn't mean that it's true. That doesn't mean that is what happened. But it would, if it got out to the public, ruin her reputation, which, as we see, it kind of did. But her reputation was pretty sour already, which is why so many people believed it. But this sort of thing is why you got to be very careful about the enemies that you make. Because relationship savaging is a form of female bullying. Is also a form of beta male bullying. And what I mean by this is alpha male is more likely to punch you in the face, take your lunch money, physical intimidation, putting hands on you, shoving you, smack you in the back of the head, all that kind of stuff, But beta males and women, what they do is they don't necessarily go after you directly. They go after your reputation. They go after your image. And this is in some ways just as bad. It's in some ways worse. Because, if a bully is pushing you, slapping you around, other people can see that. They may even leave a mark, But when people are spreading rumors, more than likely nobody knows what's the truth. And most of the time you can't trace it back to an original source. So if this is something that is not true, then this is one of those things where she done pissed off the wrong person. And they decided that They're gonna destroy her reputation, and a lot of people believe it. So it doesn't matter whether it's true or not at this point. A lot of people believe it. Just like I'm not gonna go into it. So let's skip past that. There are other things that can happen to which people can lie and say that you did something that you didn't do, or they can misconstrue things, or whatever the case may be. But they recently just did this with Jada Parker, the young lady in NXT. Once they heard she was a quote-unquote transphobe, just immediately she was having sex with Jey Uso, like out of nowhere. And it's like, what? Where did that come from? But because people are mad at you, now they'll say whatever, because they don't care about you anymore. They want to bring you down a peg. They want to hurt you. They want to hurt your reputation. So you have to be careful when people are whispering, especially people who talk to dirt sheets, and especially people who talk to dirt sheets anonymously. They're always looking to destroy people that they already don't like. You very rarely hear people tell these harsh truths about people that they do like. Most of the time, they spend so much time talking about people that they don't like, they never really get around to people that they do. So I feel bad for Brett, because if it's true, not everybody knows. And if it's not true, then everybody thinks it's true anyway. So let's move on and get into this show. Kenny Omega and Will Ospreay, they're trying to form a tag team like, they're the Mega Powers. Oh, God, the Omega Powers. Ospreay says that Omega came back at the wrong time. Callis has been in the way of his chase for the world title. Omega reminded everybody that Will Ospreay stabbed him with a screwdriver and dropped him on his head. Says that he did it to prove himself to Don Callis. And he says that Will Ospreay is not in his league, and he doesn't accept any apologies. He will not team up with Will Ospreay. Don Callis appears. Omega's immediately fired up, and now we get the longest brawl probably of all time. It seemed like it was about an 8-minute brawl. 8 to 10 minutes at least. It featured these guys fighting backstage, fighting in the merch table, which led to Omega and Ospreay working together to suplex Lance Archer through the merch table. They ended up fighting outside, not outside, but outside the ring. Omega climbed a light fixture while Ospreay climbed the balcony, and they both did moonsaults off of these things. So this is a very, very long fight scene. After the big jumps, the big moonsaults, Callis' boys, they decided to retreat. Then Omega and Ospreay both climbed the light fixture and challenged them to a tag team match in Australia. Then Omega admitted that he was scared of heights. Very weird stuff here. Look, it's a simple story. They're bounded by... it happened kind of fast, but then again, it kind of had to, because the pay-per-view is next week. They went from, hey, I can't stand you, you stabbed me, you dropped me on my head, to maybe we should have worked together from the beginning, because it's 4-on-2, So, at least they try to tell a story in this segment, so I'm not gonna rip them apart for that. But, I don't... Is this match... I should specify. The tag team match is Konosuke Takeshita and Kyle Fletcher versus Will Ospreay and Kenny Omega. So, it's a fine match. It's a pretty good match for that show. It gets Kyle Fletcher on the card, and it doesn't waste any of their big singles matches. But you could tell that this Australia show was supposed to be bigger, and they're finding ways to downgrade it. So, you got Omega and Ospreay on the show, but neither are in singles matches. Instead, they're in a kind of a forced tag team situation. Also, Will Ospreay's haircut. It was very much like a kid on his first day of school. It was adorable. Next, Jon Moxley says that Edge went to sleep in 2011 and woke up in 2025 in a world where he didn't belong. Then he said that his neck is hanging on by a thread, and maybe his next doctor visit will bring some bad news. He starts talking about putting Edge to sleep, but he says he personally doesn't have time to sleep. He's building a future. This leads to the main event where Edge defeated Pac. Pac being one of the Death Riders who you seldom see. He's kind of always there, but you never actually pay attention to this guy. Pac has been in AEW since 2019. He was positioned as being a franchise player, being a big coup that had left WWE a couple months before, actually. And he has done fuck all in AEW. And he has done nothing. I know he was the first international champion or something like that. It doesn't matter. He's just had a bunch of good matches. He's just a good match guy. He's a good match fairy. But Edge, oh my lord, he looked aged in this match. And he has what gone on podcast talking about this ageism, trying to get people to call him Cope. I refuse. And trying to basically assuage everybody who's kind of pissy about AEW right now. But I like that he talked about the ageism, and I think that this is fun. He says that AEW has given him a new lease on life. He says it really has for a lot of performers. Ageism is a thing. And it's really a thing in our industry. And the interesting thing within our industry is that the older you get, the better you are, because you have more knowledge. You have felt more audiences. You've been in these positions. So nothing really throws you. Mentally, I'm better than I ever was. And that can be the challenge in physically keeping up with the mental. But he says he likes Tony Khan as a human being and all this kind of stuff. But I've heard that a lot from guys. You say, wrestling is mostly mental, and psychologically he's better than he's ever been. But physically, boy, that guy's in shambles. Okay? He's in shambles. It's just unfortunate that he's in this situation. If he didn't wrestle so frequently, it probably wouldn't be that big a deal. But because he wrestles all the time, it becomes glaringly obvious that he's more than a step behind. They need to take the CM Punk method. Punk has wrestled only a handful of times in WWE. He's been there a year. I know he was injured for a spell there. But even after that, he didn't wrestle that often. I think Edge should take that same schedule where he doesn't try to go out there and prove that he's still a full-time performer. He has nothing to prove to anybody. And anybody who's watching this show already knows he has no business being a full-time performer. It's the same exact thing with Bryan Danielson. You don't have to try to work a full-time schedule. Get out of here. That's ridiculous. Work some matches, some big matches, some important matches, and then you move on. Just work when you need to and move on. Anyway, after this match, Moxley and them jumped Edge and beat him up. They also, believe it or not, murdered the Rock and Roll Express and had FTR tied up. And I'm thinking, for starters, where did the Rock and Roll Express come from? Look, I know they were on Collision a couple of weeks ago, but if you're going to tell the story about the Rock and Roll Express, shouldn't they be on this show? Like, why couldn't you show the Rock and Roll Express backstage with Edge shaking his hand, giving him a pep talk or something like that, just so everybody would know that they're present on the show. But not only that, but that the crowd knows that Edge is a fan. They got Edge's back tonight, or whatever the case may be. And then you have them get beat up. It's Chekhov's gun. You show it first, just so people can be like, oh, I saw that, and then you pay it off later. In this situation, they did something 2 weeks ago that most of the audience didn't see, and then tried to pay it off. And I'm like, I didn't know FTR or the Rock and Roll Express were in the building. So why do I care about any of this stuff? But apparently they think you should. And then Jay White came out there. He looks to be as old as Edge, and he's literally like half his age. And then they beat him up too. So this goes back to what I start this video with. You have the big save by Jay White. And look, you can feel how you want to feel about Jay White. But the fact that he just got mollywopped I mean, it's 4-on-1, sure enough. But the fact that nobody else did anything, they just watched this guy get beat up. And then Jay White tried to be the big hero, and then he got beat up. And it's like, is that it? We saw Powerhouse Hobbs earlier. We saw him cut a promo. Where is he? He got jumped by these guys last week. Why isn't he out there trying to save Edge and trying to help Edge and fight these guys? We heard Will Ospreay earlier in the night talk about how he wants to combat Moxley and get involved with all this stuff, and yet they're in the same building. He still does nothing. I don't get it. I'm not getting it. I'm not getting how this is your top storyline and most of the people are not involved, or nor do they seem to care. The other factions don't seem to care. The other babyfaces don't seem to care. Nobody cares. Like, the NWO does not work if it's not an all-encompassing story, and it doesn't work unless other characters care. All right? That's what made it work. Now, I may agree that we don't need undercard NWO guys like, Scott Norton and stuff, right? Maybe too many people. But having undercard guys gives the baby faces some fodder that they can beat. You can beat up Virgil and, the Buff Bagwell and all those guys, because who cares, right? The real NWO players that we care about is like Hall, Nash, Hogan, and Savage. Those kinds of guys. And you're not going to wrestle those guys all the time. And if you do, 9 times out of 10, they should kick your ass to maintain their heat. But eventually, they do have to put somebody over, And in this situation, none of the guys other than Moxley is over. Nobody cares about Claudio. Nobody cares about Pac. Wheeler Yuta's mama don't even answer his phone calls. So I can tell you, nobody cares about these people. And then, again, Marina Shafir is a woman, and none of the women care about what's going on. And Marina Shafir doesn't care about the women's title. There's so many people who are just happy living under the new Moxley rules. And we don't even know what that means anyway, because he's just beating people up. It's not like anything has actually changed on the show outside of the babyfaces are getting their shit kicked in every week. Otherwise, he's not making any real changes to the product. He's not changing the rules, like a Ravens rules kind of gimmick or something like that, where he's changing the rules of the matches, or he's got his own referees, or he's, something like that, to show you that there has been a real paradigm shift in how AEW is being presented. There's been nothing. It's been the same product it's always been. And it's not working. It's just not working. You can't have Skeletor win every fight, He's got to lose. And I don't know why they decided to do this, but they decided to do it. So that's on them. Too tough. The first match on the show was an elongated squash match as Hurt Business, Bobby Lashley, and Shelton Benjamin kicked the shit out of Private Party and won the tag team championships. Private Party were such an afterthought. They played some kind of weird music while they were coming to the ring and then switched it to shots halfway through. I was like, did they come out to the wrong theme song? Like, what is going on here? It was so bad. Lashley then slammed one of the kids through a table. And then, things got a little weird. Shelton Benjamin had to put himself in position for a 450. I wasn't a fan of that. But for the most part, the Hurt Business kicked their ass. There was some offense by Private Party, but not much. The Hurt Business was never any real danger. So it's just a thorough drubbing by the Hurt Business. Shelton Benjamin is out there working like he's Kane. My God. I know these guys are small, but Jesus Christ. And Lashley is just dog walking these kids, man. It's so bad. People walked away from this actually feeling bad for Private Party. Well, you have to have a soul to care about Private Party. Because everybody else was just like, hey, the Hurt Business is cool, so they should win. And they did win. Yay. Like, nobody felt bad about the baby faces actually getting drubbed. Nobody gave a shit. Everybody was happy that they got their asses kicked. I'm pretty sure one of these guys, whichever one it is it Quinn? Walking around with green hair is not doing himself any favors. Harley Cameron wants to have a match in Australia because she's Australian. Somehow I missed that. Anyway, she interrupted Tony Storm's interview so that they can talk Aussie, which is a bunch of rippers and shoeies and mates. And I was like, I don't understand what the hell they're talking about. In any event, Tony Storm basically just told her, hey, there's always a chance that you could wrestle in Australia too. So then when Mercedes Moné, who did not start walking until the camera was on, because clearly somebody was behind her, like, and go. You know, she was waiting for the red light. Like, how is she in the hallway just standing there with all these belts? And then as soon as somebody tells her to start walking, she starts walking. So she's being very annoying. She wants to have a match in Australia, but they have no opponent. So then Harley Cameron shows up, and she's playing guitar, and she's singing. And I'm not fully understanding what the hell she's saying. But it made sense because she wants to fight for the TBS title in Australia. That's what she wants. And Mercedes said no because Harley Cameron has not won a match this year. And she hasn't won a match last year. She hasn't won a match ever. So the answer is no. So the storyline is that Harley Cameron wants to get on the card in Australia. She tried to get a championship match. That didn't work. So what kind of match is she going to end up getting? Maybe she does get the TBS championship match through some kind of Hail Mary. Maybe she wins a match on Collision or something. I don't know. I don't know how she would get a win. Maybe her and Tony Storm work a tag team match on Collision or something and she actually gets a win. And then she can say, I want a match so you can give me a title shot or something. I don't know. But I'm pretty sure she's going to be on the show. At the same time, though, they're leaning into every single talent that Harley Cameron has. But she is coming across as being very... it's not focused. You know, she just seems to be doing random stuff. And it's very R-Truth-ish. Where there is some underlying logic to it. But it's so chaotic at the same time that you're not really sure what the hell's going on or why, you know, but whatever. Moving on, Colonel Jeff Jarrett shows up. Karen told him to stop getting in the mud with MJF. So the Colonel comes out there. I don't know why his hair won't stay down. It just keeps puffing back up. I don't understand. So Colonel Jarrett tells a Jerry Lawler story that ends with, don't get in the gutter with the opposition. He says coming home reminded him of who he is. He's going to deal with MJF Southern style one day and take him out to the woodshed. Then he says that the fans gave him the gift of believing in himself and he wants that world championship match and he called out Moxley. And instead of getting Moxley, he got Claudio. So Claudio uppercuts the Colonel and flattens him. And then tells him that he's got to go through him first if he wants to get a championship match. And then told him to mind his own business. Stay out of their business. As he's walking away, the Colonel gets up, challenged Claudio to a match, and Claudio accepted it. This took about 10 minutes. They're investing way too much time in this Jeff Jarrett storyline. And it wasn't over because then MJF came out later and talked about Jeff Jarrett. They're putting way too much into this storyline. And I don't see a feasible payoff. I don't see no big show in his hometown. I don't see a one last match kind of thing that they're trying to do here. I don't see how this pays off in any meaningful way. I just don't. So I don't think you need to invest so much time into it. MJF will come out later. He explained that Jeff Jarrett owes the fans and him an apology and that he never believed in Jeff Jarrett. He only thought that Jeff Jarrett was easy to manipulate and he was certainly easy to beat. Then he says that Jeff Jarrett believes that he can grind out more time, but the business has passed him by, and ultimately he should have made the deal with the devil. I don't see how this pays off in any meaningful way. I just don't see how this works out for everybody. Jarrett is not a main event guy right now. I don't think there's anybody in the audience or anybody listening to the sound of my voice that thinks Jeff Jarrett will win the World Championship of AEW. I don't think anybody believes that. And quite frankly, I don't think anybody actually wants it. You know, you may look at the Cinderella story and say, oh man, wouldn't it be nice if, but in your heart of hearts, you know goddamn well Colonel Jeff Jarrett has no business fighting for the world title. Just none. He really doesn't have any business feuding with MJF. He really doesn't have any business having matches with Claudio. You really should not be investing this much time into Jeff Jarrett. And you just shouldn't be. All right. Now, during this time, MJF had basically told a jabroni to get out of the ring. This jabroni was the opponent of Hangman Page. Hangman Page came into the ring while MJF was still in there. He demanded that MJF leave. So MJF, you know, he follows directions. He did it. He left. MJF then defeated the jabroni and then, of course, continued to beat him up after the fight, after the match. Then Christopher Daniels came out there and talked about how he's done. You know, they had a Texas death match on Collision. It was his last fight. He said he regrets getting into that fight with Hangman Page. His doctors have advised him to never wrestle again. I watched the match, by the way. I don't really watch Collision, but I did watch that match. I did want to see the final performance of Christopher Daniels, and it was okay. It was all right. It was a bloody affair, but mostly Hangman worked very strong and beat the hell out of Christopher Daniels, which is what it should have been. And Daniels, I'm sorry, you know, took a lot of punishment before finally going down for the count. So he says goodbye to Hangman, pats him on the shoulder, and says now he hopes that Hangman is happy. Now Hangman is conflicted because that's what he does best. He was all about the rage. He was all about the violence until somebody really got hurt, and now he can't wrestle anymore. And now he's sitting back thinking about it like, man, maybe I went too hard. Maybe I kicked too much ass. You know, maybe too much cowboy shit. You know, obviously they gave Hangman the final match of Christopher Daniels because they wanted to get him over. And clearly they're trying to move this towards him feeling sorry for himself again. Probably building up some kind of sympathy that he didn't expect to do all this. And this is going to lead to his change. I think they want him, the fans want him to be a babyface, Hangman Page. He is one of the few people that the crowd actually likes. I mean, genuinely, they like him. So this is probably going to lead to his babyface turn, where he's probably going to be somewhat apologetic about all the stuff that he's done and, beating the hell out of Christopher Daniels and forcing him into retirement. So I just see that that's kind of where they're going with this, which is, of course, fine. Swerve Strickland defeated AR Fox in their best of 7,000 that they've got going on here. And AR Fox has not won one of these matches in, I don't know, a decade or so. It's a really stupid match, by the way. Who the hell... You could tell Swerve got the book because AR Fox is on the show. There was a rumor, and yes, I did hear the rumor, that Lashley and Swerve were not working together anymore due to creative differences. And but that storyline was dropped very, very hard, wasn't it? And as soon as that's over, AR Fox is back. The guy hadn't been on TV in over a year, I think, and now all of a sudden he's back because Swerve needs a win. So here he is. So Ricochet shows up, and he's holding these tiny pair of scissors. He's still bald. Very bald, by the way. And Prince Nana is decided he's going to walk Ricochet down with like a pipe or a bat or something. Or some kind of cylinder. I don't know. Ricochet flees. Nana follows him. The match happens. The match ends. And then on the big screen, Ricochet has the scissors to the throat of Prince Nana. And he starts talking about how Swerve Strickland embarrassed him. And he has some stuff that he wants to get off his chest because nobody's going to get away with humiliating him, bullying him, and embarrassing him. And then he says that he should tear Prince Nana apart with these scissors. He says, I need you to send a message. Tell Swerve that, the house has a new landlord and rent is due. And that was it. And he walked off. And Swerve was just pacing around in the ring. Eventually he got out of the ring, but, he was Ricochet was long gone by the time he got back there. Later on, Swerve Strickland yells at the camera about wanting to fight Ricochet. So he's going to fight him in Atlanta in 2 weeks. And then I just thought about that, and I was like, wait a minute. They have a show in Australia? Why not book Swerve Strickland and Ricochet for that show in Australia? And then I thought about it, and I was like, well, I can almost guarantee you that if it's their stadium show, they probably would have. But because they downgraded the show, and it's no longer a pay-per-view, it's no longer a stadium show, they just don't care anymore. So now, get in where you fit in, boss. But I'm pretty sure they needed a main event for that show anyway. So, look, they're doing too much with Ricochet and these scissors. You can't have this guy go from being a dork 1 second, who is basically being pushed around by managers and the fans, and then him being a psychotic scissor-wielding maniac. On the other hand, it doesn't make sense. Be consistent. He should never have been in that gauntlet match. He should be operating very differently. He should not be fleeing from Prince Nana. I know it was all a trap to lead to the pre-tape, but I still don't like it. I still don't like that Ricochet was running away from Prince Nana. It just doesn't make sense. This guy just stabbed these people all in the head and shit. Now he's running from Prince Nana? He couldn't get the jump on Prince Nana? Nana's senses are better than Swerve's? I don't know, man. Like, this doesn't make sense to me. It's stupid. Anyway, Jericho was upset that Big Bill won't do anything about losing. So Big Bill challenged Willie Hobbs, Powerhouse Hobbs, to a match. Powerhouse Hobbs said he'd meet him in the parking lot. It's like they're going to have a parking lot fight. Okay, whatever. Julia Hart lost to Jamie Hayter. They're 1-1. After the match, Jamie Hayter said Julia Hart is a tough bitch, and she's ready for round 3 whenever Julia is ready. I was like, okay, interesting. And then they did a video package for Buddy, Julia, and Brody, saying that there's no longer going to be any shadows. There's no longer going to be a guiding voice. There's not going to be any leaders. There's only going to be violence. So they are saying officially that the House of Black is done for, even though they announced that Julia Hart was representing the House of Black before her match with Jamie Hayter. So that means between the time she lost to Jamie Hayter and whatever other segment occurred, these three got together and decided they were leaving the House of Black, even though they were going to stay together. Just the three of them. And they were leaving the House of Black and going to do their own thing. At least they had the good sense to build this up with, various different people telling them how great they were as an individual and how they don't need, all these other people with them and all this kind of stuff. But they decided to stay together despite all of that and continue under a new label, which is not going to be the House of Black, because I'm guessing Aleister Black is taking that with him, because apparently he's now gone. It's going to be official now. They have even begun the reboot of these characters. Buddy Murphy, or Buddy Matthews, has trademarked the name Hellhounds. So it seems like that's going to be the name of the group. I don't even see why they keep going with the dark, hell black, occult kind of gimmick. I don't even see why you're still sticking with that. You can go in a different direction. This is what makes me think that this is just a ripoff of Judgment Day. Because, Judgment Day somehow kept the Gothic gimmick, even though the Gothic guy was not in it anymore. What does Dominic Mysterio have to do with, smoke and mirrors? Like, nothing. Finn Balor, at least he fits to a degree. Maybe Damian Priest and maybe Rhea Ripley, where you have like the hard rock sort of heavy metal vibe. Yeah, you can probably bring them in there. But Dominic Mysterio, that was weird. Okay, that was very weird. Liv Morgan, very weird to be in that situation. But clearly they just wanted to continue the vibe that Edge had created. But you had to write Edge out. They had to write Edge out. So in this situation, they're doing it. It seems like it's the same thing, but there's going to be some kind of minor tweaks. I think Brody King said something about no more shadows, and they were out in the light, and the promos weren't in the dark anymore. There were no candles and all that kind of stuff. Okay, but maybe give it some time, and I'll talk about a lot more time. And by a lot, I don't mean like a month. I mean like maybe the next week. Julia Hart literally was just representing the House of Black in her match that was not long before this promo, right? Maybe they needed to have a sit down and talk about it. Because each person, and I noticed this, each person is coming off of a loss. And it's a loss in a tough match to a tough opponent who showed them much respect afterwards. And that was something to discuss, that maybe they could do this thing on their own and they just choose not to. Maybe they decide they're going to help each other, But I did like at least that element is that each one of them are coming off a loss and something's got to change. And that would be something that would be interesting to pursue. That's what I mean by soap opera storytelling. Everybody in the group has lost except Malachi. You could have even did a vignette where Malachi releases them, says that they were worthless, or that he doesn't need them anymore, or he doesn't want them anymore, or whatever the case may be. Or you could do the other way around, and they can say, this House of Black thing ain't working for me. It ain't working for you because you lost. It ain't working for me because I lost. Something's got to change. Maybe we don't need to listen to that guy anymore. Maybe we don't need to listen to that voice anymore. And, build up people's interest in what this thing is going to look like and why they are staying together. Because we see that they're staying together, but why? Why when Buddy Matthews was told he didn't need to be with the other guys? Why when Julia Hart was told she didn't need to be with those other guys? Why? So why do it with those other people? What's bonding you together? Because now we were told what bonded you together was Malachi Black. Now he's gone. So something else has to bring you together. What is that? That's one of the things about factions. You have to tell people what brings your faction together. What is the collective goal of the faction? What is, the motto, the what's the reason for it, They just say, hey, we were already working together, so we're going to continue working together. I mean, okay, that's fine. Whatever. Anyway, I said it earlier in the show. This show has pissed a lot of people off. Everybody hates these Dynamites, mostly because they don't believe in the baby faces. One of the problems is they have too many heel groups. You have Moxley's group running around, and you have Don Callis' group running around, and these two groups never come into contact. You have the Hurt Business running around. Those groups never come into contact. So there's no real hierarchy established of which the most dominant group. You assume that it's Moxley's group because they have most of the segments and they have the world title. But the fans are more behind the Hurt Business. They give them more of a reaction. And when it comes to the heel groups, Don Callis' group actually gets more heat than Moxley's group. And that's mostly because Don Callis' group is feuding with Kenny Omega and Will Ospreay, who are the two top baby faces. So if Moxley is not feuding with the top baby faces, what is he doing? Like he's just feuding with upper mid card guys. And look, it's well, we also got Jericho's group running around too, by the way. So there's a lot of heel factions floating around in AEW. Too many. And not nearly enough strong heroes to take them down. And that's been it. Also, you got Christian's faction. I just thought about that. You got Christian's faction running around. So you have 4 or 5 factions running around. And they all are floating around championships. The world title is Moxley's group. The tag titles are the Hurt Business. The international belts is Callis's group. And Christians have that championship contract thing or whatever. So you have all these groups with all these different things floating around them and very few strong baby faces to oppose them. And then when you do have somewhat of a strong baby face like a Samoa Joe, he's not on the show, right? He's not featured. Or he doesn't do any real damage to the group at all anyway at any point in time. Maybe they flee and, some jabronis get beat up, but nothing else occurs. You got to add some pizzazz. You got to get some baby faces people care about. They have to be positioned correctly. They have to start getting some real wins. And what I mean by that is they have to leave the bad guys laying or make a big save. And, couple of weeks of that. You can't do the old school John Cena where, he beats up everybody. 15-on-1, John Cena kicks everybody's ass, the Hulk Hogan treatment. That might not work all the time. But you kind of do need that. You kind of do need that. And I think you had that with Powerhouse Hobbs as a babyface. He was a guy who you could believably send in there who could bump Pac and Moxley and Claudio and throw these guys over the top rope and people will be 100% in on it, But they decided to throw that away. I don't think that they believe Edge can do stuff like that. Now, if he had like a steel chair and he was taking guys out with that, maybe. But it's just not working. The thing is, there's too many heels. The heels are too strong. They occupy too many positions. And you don't have strong enough baby faces to combat them. Nobody believes in your baby faces. So you have a world with no hope. That's a wasteland. It's almost like Mad Max, in the movie, the first movie, where, roving bandits are just doing whatever they want. And that's a very dour future. But somebody has to stand up and be Max. Somebody has to stand up and be the guy who tries to restore some kind of order or impart some kind of street justice on these people. They refuse to do it. And maybe it's because these heels got too much experience and they got creative control or whatever the fuck. But you got too many, even when you talk about the Hurt Business, they completely destroyed Private Party. Just completely destroyed them. And you're like, okay, now what? Who's going to be a conceivable threat to these dudes? They just crushed and steamrolled Private Party. And there's no baby faces on the other side that can compete with them. None. There's no tag team that can conceivably beat Shelton Benjamin and Bobby Lashley at this point in time. So what are you going to do? They're just going to steamroll everybody. And is that the foreseeable future? I guess. Until at some point. And you would think, okay, well, the inevitable buildup is going to be Lashley and the Hurt Business versus, the Death Riders. Not necessarily. Or Lashley and the Hurt Business going up against Don Callis and his group. Not necessarily. Because these groups don't conflict already. They don't have any crossover issues or anything like that, which you would expect all these alpha males in these groups to be territorial. Moxley's talking about how he's building the future. He's doing all this shit. Why is Lashley letting him do all that? Why are you letting him talk like this? He's talking about how he rules the roost on a company that you're on. That doesn't make any sense. It's the exact same thing when they were in WWE and everybody was like, hey, why don't the Hurt Business handle the Bloodline? And it was something that even, Lashley and Shelton and all these guys talked about when they left. They was like, hey, why couldn't we feud with the Bloodline? And I'm thinking, yeah, why couldn't you feud with the Bloodline? Well, it was because Vince decided he wanted to have one major heel faction, and that was it. And, Shelton Benjamin, he did an interview where he says that he was personally offended because Vince thought that the money was simply an MVP and Lashley as a team, and he was offended by that because he was a part of that group, and he had gotten taken out of it. And, of course, it didn't last much longer anyway. And I felt bad for him. I really did, because Shelton Benjamin is an important part of this group. And I do think it was a slap in his face, and I don't like that. Especially because I love the Hurt Business. And I do think that he left money on the table when it comes to the Hurt Business and the Bloodline. I do think that you had something there. The issue is, of course, is the Hurt Business going to overshadow them? Just like Jake the Snake Roberts never got that match with Hulk Hogan because, DDT was too over. Maybe the Hurt Business was too over. Maybe Vince saw what the Hurt Business did to Retribution and said, I'm not about to let this happen to the Bloodline. So, because Roman Reigns is like one of my top talents, I'm not about to have him go out there and, get steamrolled and his group be seen as less than. Or nor do I want to book the Hurt Business to get beat every week. So instead of doing that, he just kept them apart. And then decided I only need one dominant faction in the company. I don't need two. I don't need four. So now you're in the exact same situation here in AEW where now you got four factions running around and don't interact at all. They don't interact. It's not even like a Gangs of New York kind of situation where they all have sat down and agreed to not get in each other's way. Which you could actually do if you wanted. That would actually be fun if there was like some kind of summit where MVP and Moxley and Christian and Don Callis have all got in the room and they all decide we're not going to step on each other's toes. You guys do your thing. We'll do our thing. You guys have these championships. Until you lose these championships, we won't challenge for them. We'll leave you alone. As long as you leave us alone, because we got this championship. Blah, 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 blah. And it'll actually come across maybe a little bit better and would explain why they don't have any sort of crossover. They stay out of each other's way. They already agreed to do it. And it's always better when heels kind of agree to be bastards, And then obviously somebody's going to stab somebody in the back because that's kind of how heels work, right? But if I was booking it and I had all these fucking factions, for starters, I wouldn't have all these goddamn factions. But that would be the best way to do it, is everybody would agree, this is your territory, this is your time, we're not going to fuck with that. Kind of like the families in New York, the gangs in New York, the mob, we don't try to poach none of your members, we're not going to try to take any of your championships, we're not going to try to do anything, we're going to let you have what you have. And then, of course, over time, you start to unravel that. The Hurt Business lose the tag team titles, and now Don Callis' group is going to chase for them because, hey, we agreed, but now you've lost them, so now we're going to come after you, blah, blah, blah. That kind of thing. That could make for longer-term stories and could be more fun for you to do. And it will actually get people interested in when you do things like these casino gauntlets. Because Moxley's group has the world title. So, okay, what if Shelton Benjamin wants to be in the casino gauntlet, but they had an agreement that they wouldn't do that. But then he decided to get in there anyway. And now Moxley can have some heat with those guys. They can have, issues there. Or maybe Takeshita has an open challenge for the international belt. And, oh, here comes, Nick Wayne from Christian's group. And he's like, what the hell is this, I thought you going to stay away from us, leave us alone. Or even more fun, you could try to have Don Callis enlist Bobby Lashley to handle the Samoa Joe problem for him. That kind of shit. You could just do so much stuff if you wanted to keep the factions together and have all these goddamn factions. At least have them interact. The fact that they don't interact and then there's no baby faces. What the fuck? We just watching these guys get beat up other people every week. We're watching 10-minute brawls. I'm sick of generic brawls too, by the way. Sick to death of generic brawling. All right? Just guys oof, 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 punching each other. It's the shits. It's terrible. It's truly terrible. But Dynamite is just getting worse and worse. It's a virtually unwatchable show. There's nobody to believe in, nobody to root for, and even the bad guys aren't really all that interesting. Huge fan of the Hurt Business, so I'm glad they won. That was the only good thing on the show as far as I'm concerned. Everything else, I don't really need. AEW desperately needs a shot in the arm. But I don't know where that's going to come from, because that would require them to break up the monotony of all these factions beating up everybody every week. So let me know what you think, and I'll talk to you guys later.
No one doesn't bury